Okay, great. Thanks, Lauren. Well, welcome back, everyone. I think the email message that I sent out to you, finally got some of the kinks ironed out about that. And I'm going to send you some more like that as examples of propaganda. Um, there is a distribution chain for conservative messages or so-called conservative messages. I would debate whether or not it's conservative or not. Um, one of the things about our political lexicon is that terms kind of become locked in place, even though what it's describing may have gone through a lot of changes and not be what you think it is. But anyway, so I'm going to send you some more, and because I'd like you to see how this stuff plays out. Um, and and so today we're going to focus more on propaganda, and the dictionary definition: information, ideas, or rumors deliberately spread widely to help or harm a person, group, movement, institution, nation. The deliberate spreading of such information, rumors, etc., the particular doctrines or principles propagated, propaganda, by an organization or movement. And we all have the example of the Nazis, Goebbels, Hitler, that we can relate to. There is a book that came out 2016, very well done. It's an academic work. I can't remember where he's a pro. I think he may be at University of Penn. Anyway, the title of the book is Selling Hitler, and he examines what the Goebbels and company were doing to sell their ideas. He also makes a very important point, which is that the Nazis didn't force their ideas on anyone. What they did is they understood ideas that were already existing in the minds of their audience and how they would manipulate that. And that was really the key to their success. But because the Hitler regime represented the enthronement of both marketing and propaganda, not as mere instruments, but as the essential core of government. And herein is the uniqueness as a historical context. Nazism, quite simply, was history's ultimate political campaign and is therefore of perennial interest to students of campaigning. And I think it is important to contemplate that as we look at our own political discourse. What is going on there? Even when you hear things that you know are objectively untrue, it is still being pursued by people in prominent positions, elected positions. So it's important to kind of look at the roots of this and how it emerges. And I talk about the roots of this. By the way, my friend Nina sent me an article about propaganda that went back to 1922. So we're 100 years later, and yet the same issues are taking place. Hitler was way ahead of his era in comprehending the engineering of consent. The troubling matter of how public opinion can be manufactured and governments elected via the use of sophisticated methodologies of persuasion developed in the consumer economy. So the mass marketing, the selling of the product can be used to manufacture consent. Manufacture consent. And they're based on ideas that are already there. There are scholars who argue whether or not Hitler was really anti-Semitic. That when we look at his life in the List Regiment during World War I, throughout the years of the war, None of the people in the List Regiment recall him ever expressing anti-Semitic views. But what we know is that anti-Semitism was deeply rooted within Germany and throughout Europe and certainly in America. And so what you get is they're exploiting those ideas that are existing. It's not necessarily what they might think. Doesn't matter what they think. They want to know what that person thinks, and then they want to be able to exploit it and manipulate it for their agenda. And so I want to share with you now a video about how Woodrow Wilson here we go, may have been the first to start using, not the first to start using propaganda, I wanted to say before Hitler was using propaganda, that Woodrow Wilson was doing that. Anyway, let's take a look at this.
Once you get on, just open up. Yeah, right. I think light them all up. Come on, fire. Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
This was the slaughter known as the First World War. 16 million died and 21 million were wounded. At the height of the carnage, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, David Lloyd George, had a private chat with the editor of The Guardian, C.P. Scott. If people really knew the truth, said the Prime Minister, the war would be stopped tomorrow. But of course they don't know and can't know. The British public were desperate for real news. More than half the nation flocked to see an official propaganda film, The Battle of the Somme. Cameras were so unusual that young troops would shout, "Hello, Mum," as they marched to the front, and they were heard crying for their mothers as they died on the battlefield. This was almost never reported. These days, we have 24-hour news. The sound bites never stop, and the wars never stop. Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine. This film is about the war you don't see. Drawing on my own experience as a war correspondent, it will look mainly at television, concentrating on the most popular channels in America and Britain. The film will ask, what is the role of the media in rapacious wars like Iraq and Afghanistan? Why do many journalists beat the drums of war, regardless of the lives of governments? And how are the crimes of war reported and justified when they're our crimes? A pioneer of modern propaganda was this man, Edward Bernays. Bernays invented the term public relations. He wrote, "The intelligent manipulation of the masses is an invisible government which is the true ruling power in our country." He was part of a secretive group called the US Committee on Public Information, set up in 1917 to persuade reluctant Americans to join the war in Europe.
Edward Bernays and Walter Lippmann go to Woodrow Wilson and say, "Look, man, if you're going to enter into this war, we are going to need to sell this war to the American people." And so Wilson institutes and creates the first modern propaganda machinery. It was actually quite brilliant in its conceptualization. So that the best way to persuade people is to grab them by their emotions, by their unconscious and instinctual urges. Let's not bother with pumping out facts. Let's scare the hell out of people. A picture of the Statue of Liberty in tatters, crumbled into the New York harbor with German planes flying around it. A picture of the world being gobbled up by the bloody hands of a gorilla wearing a German helmet. So, it's not about facts anymore. The facts don't matter.
And the Nazis take the concept and they refine it.
The treaty put all German territory west of the Rhine under Allied occupation for 15 years. Allied forces moved into the area stretching along the river from the city of Kiel to Cologne in January 1920. Of the 100,000 troops in the French army of occupation, more than a fifth came from the French colonies: Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Senegal, Madagascar, or Vietnam. German troops had encountered them on the battlefields near Ypres and in the trenches of Verdun. Horror stories about the African soldiers' savagery made the rounds on the home front. As a result, the Germans were awaiting their French occupiers with no little trepidation. During these days, many Germans saw people of color for the first time in their lives.
Until
just before World War I, there was no question of deploying black soldiers in Europe. Then an officer named Charles Mangin wrote a successful and controversial book in 1910 called La Force Noire, the Black Force, where he said, the Senegalese riflemen are good soldiers. They've proven themselves in Africa. Why shouldn't we deploy them in a war in France? It was clear that France was afraid of Germany. In 1914, Germany was a stable, rich, powerful country with a population of 65 million. And there were only 39 million French to stand against them. It was a foregone conclusion that the relationship was completely lopsided and that France was doomed to defeat militarily. So they needed to find soldiers. And Charles Mangin proposed that they rely on an immense reservoir of African troops.
During the war, they were already publishing propaganda warning that the French colonial troops would cut off the ears of German soldiers and wear them on strings around their necks, that they were barbaric and acted like animals, and were being ordered to do so by their French superiors. Stories like this and all these fears were already being whipped up anyway. Now their focus was simply redirected onto these colonial troops in the Rhineland. And then, of course, there was also deep-seated racism that wasn't just confined to the Germans. The idea that troops from North Africa, Senegal, and Vietnam were now in a position of power over the German civilian population. Well, that was a reversal of the established colonial hierarchy, wasn't it? That these colonial subjects could now exercise authority over Europeans who had once been colonial masters themselves was perceived as extreme humiliation.
The abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II, whom the Conservatives revered as a symbol of national identification, on November 9, 1918, merely compounded the sense of crisis. Philipp Scheidemann, one of the Social Democrats' leaders, rushed to declare the end of the old order.
Er und seine Freunde sind verschwunden. Über die Jahre hat das Volk auf der ganzen Linie gesiegt. Seid euch die geschichtliche Bedeutung dieses Tages bewusst. Unerhörtes ist geschehen. Das Alte und Morsche, die Monarchie ist zusammengebrochen. Es lebe das Neue, es lebe die deutsche Republik.
But the fledgling republic was in danger from the outset, because what was old and rotten hadn't really disappeared. In fact, quite the contrary. The guardians of the old order became the foes of the new democracy. They rejected the idea of the Weimar Republic and above all repudiated what they called the shameful Versailles Treaty and those who, in their opinion, were responsible for it, the German Social Democrats who signed it. In March 1920,
another clip.
from spring 1920 onwards, nationalists, revanchists, and racists used every available means of propaganda and disinformation to orchestrate a campaign against what they dubbed black shame. None of the slogans or images used back then could be called innocent. The toxins spewed in this campaign continue to poison our lives until today. Old delusions in new guises that eat into the heart of our society. It started out with fake news reports like this.
At around 4 p.m. on Sunday, December 7th, 1919, a colored French colonial soldier attacked 16-year-old factory worker Gertrude M. from Euskirchen as she was crossing the Düllen-Euskirchen railway line on her way home. The soldier grabbed the frightened girl by her hands, threw her in the ditch, and held her mouth closed to prevent her screaming.
When I thought back, he bit my finger and wouldn't let go. He bit into the flesh right down to the bone, sucking the blood out so that it ran down from his mouth.
In the spring of 1920, it seemed as if overnight an army of African rapists and pedophiles had set out to systematically defile and dishonor German women, girls, and boys. The outrage over the allegedly barbaric conduct of the French colonial troops on German soil boiled over into bizarre and festering images.
Here we can see an African with deformed lips who almost looks like an ape beneath a French helmet. And when you turn the coin over, you see a German woman bound to a martyr's stake. And that is the erect penis of a black man, topped by a military helmet. These were the sexual obsessions of the Black Shame campaign. This piece is a typical example of Black Shame propaganda, which was very wide-ranging. We can't imagine how powerful this propaganda was today, but enormous amounts of money were invested in it. Brochures were translated from English, Dutch, Swedish, French, Spanish, and American English, and so on. There were postcards, illustrations, posters, medallions, and plays. They even made films about it.
Des films qui sont tournés sur ce sujet.
And so I think you can find much in our contemporary media that will highlight much of that. One of the things that Terry and I talked about was looking at what you see on TV, and I would like for you to, if you are so inclined, as you watch just regular television programming, make note of the advertising. And what I'm going to suggest is that you will see that they're appealing to a diversified audience. You will see people of color, you'll see mixed races, you'll see an appeal that's out towards a diversified group of people. And that's for people who are selling a product. When you look at our political discourse, I think you will see it aimed at very selected audiences. There will be those who are appealing to the abolitionist and those who are appealing to the slave masters. Mind you, part of what I see when we take these concepts within the political realm, what the political manipulator is looking for is what exactly is my audience. I'm not looking to appeal to everyone in America. I want to appeal to those who are going to vote for me. So the message is structured accordingly. If I'm looking to mass market and I want to sell my product across the country, then as I read the country, what I see is a sentiment for a more diversified group. So as you watch them, try to keep a track of that or observe it. And the key in understanding Nazi propaganda or propaganda in general is in speaking to ideas that are already existing inside the heads of that mass market that you want to appeal to. And again, taking another clip from Professor O'Shaughnessy in his really excellent book, Selling Hitler, Third Reich is an essay in the ability of human beings to be persuaded. People will see what they wish to see according to the concepts they possess and the values they hold. Okay. Dr. Bordan, you're on. Oh, you have to unmute. No, not yet. There you go. Okay, you're on, Terry.
I'm on.
Yes.
I'm on a lot of pills, actually. That's what I'm on. It's all psychology. It's really incredible. What we talked about last class, some of the basic psychological principles and concepts, all utilized by the propagandist. And Sal always picks topics that are so current. And indeed, this is one of them, because I found that there are 2 films on Netflix that speak to what this class is all about. So what I did was I kind of took notes when I was watching the 2 documentaries, because some of the points were really just so hard hitting. It's all psychology. And if you think you're not swayed by propaganda, think again, we all are. And Sal hit on it when he said, they want to get in our heads. They know us better than we know ourselves. Anyway, one of the films that I saw, the documentaries, was called The Great Hack. And it was about Cambridge Analytica. Many of you remember that organization from the news. They claim that something like Facebook has 5,000 points on all of us, on all people, 5,000 points, 5,000 things that they can say about us. And that data surpasses oil as the most valuable asset, because they want to get in our heads, and in our heads they do. Cambridge Analytica was so on target with people that it was Cambridge Analytica that made Ted Cruz the second runner-up to Trump before Trump was indeed the nominee. And Cruz was very hated. As a matter of fact, people were on TV saying that if someone killed him in the Senate and everybody saw it, no one would speak against the perpetrator. So that's how hated Cruz was. And Cambridge Analytica, with the games they play, they were able to make him the second runner-up. They go about targeting what they call the persuadables. There are people that are right-leaning, and right-leaning they'll always be. There are people that are left-leaning, and left-leaning they'll always be. And that's why you see a lot of the ads, a lot of the political ads aimed at the independents, because the independents are the one that is going to call the winner. Psychographics, a new term, psychographics, that's what we're talking about. And psychographics has been weaponized, and it's been weaponized against us. Some other really interesting points that I bulleted, just because they were so just shocking when you think of how clever these people are. And if they're clever and we're in their camp, then they're brilliantly clever. But if they're clever and they think as we do not, then they are these dangerous propagandists that are looking to change people's minds, get in their minds, change their minds, and vote their way. It's not by accident that Hillary was shown with handcuffs, crooked Hillary, lock her up, slogans work. And here's a good one. If you tell, and we know it, if you tell a lie often enough, that does become the truth. And we see that there are certain masters at telling the lie, telling the lie. I have had people stop me in Colorado and ask me, do I think the election was fair and honest? Tell a lie enough, it becomes the truth. Now, expose a lie, and the social psychologists have told us, expose a lie and people go, okay, it's a lie, but then they forget the default button is still the lie. That's how strong propaganda can be. 70,000 votes in 3 states determined the winner when Trump was the winner. And in those states that Trump won, every single state, his name was first on the ballot. There's nothing, there's no stone unturned. They recognize that to be first, to have your name first, you're going to get approximately 2 to 3% more votes. Who's voting for you if you're listed first? People that are indecisive, people that are, I don't know whether I want A or I want B. Let me get it over with. Okay. And they vote for the first. And all the states, by the way, that Trump carried, he was first. There's another documentary, The Social Dilemma, all about Facebook. Facebook predicts our behavior. Not only do they know what our behavior is, but they are able with their algorithms to predict our behavior before we are able to even articulate what our behavior would be. And they have huge data on all of us, and we give it to them so willingly. They appeal to our emotions. They know what emotion triggers us. They know how to get to that emotion. We'll talk in a minute about propaganda tactics. They know how to incite fear. They know how to get you to click. There was another documentary or film, it was called Clickbait. They know how to keep us interested. Not only do they know what we click on, they know how long we click on it. They know everything. Let's see what else. They called it massive contagion. The subliminal cues that are unrecognizable to our conscious brains are recognizable to our unconscious brains. And when you think that all of this is predicated upon social psychology research, you can appreciate that they know exactly what does bear through that iceberg that's on the top to get to the large iceberg that's underneath the water. And they do it very, very cleverly. So, and you know, subliminal advertising is not illegal. I think we mentioned that last week, and I found that really very shocking and surprising. And it all started in 1957 with Vance Packard and the Hidden Persuaders talking about how they would show pictures of popcorn just for a split second, even shorter than a split second, and even shorter than what it took for my computer to fall. But they get to us. And they were selling popcorn, and people got up and they bought the popcorn, and they didn't know why they bought the popcorn. And that started this whole subliminal advertising thing. And guess what? That never happened. There was no popcorn There were no subjects to see who ran out of the theater to get the popcorn, but subliminal advertising was birthed, and the researchers went about researching it even more. Are you aware that when you are anesthetized, you're under and you're having surgery, you remember nothing? But they've done research to show that indeed you did hear it, indeed you did learn, indeed the unconscious was like a sponge taking it in. And with certain kinds of questionnaires and certain kinds of surveys, they were able to determine that indeed this does happen. So what we cannot perceive consciously, we can perceive unconsciously, and they know what we're perceiving unconsciously, but we don't because it's unconscious. They get us wherever they can. The social scientists have gone into jury consulting. We'll talk about that in a minute. They've gone into all kinds of things. They certainly know that if you think that other people are voting not your way, you're going to change your vote to them. There was a research experiment where there was one line that was so visibly longer than other lines. I mean, visible to anyone, visible to a pre-verbal toddler, that this line was bigger than the other lines. So they asked the subject, because everybody else in the room were co-conspirators, they asked the subject, which is the bigger line? And the subject said, oh, it's this line. This line is much bigger than the other lines. And then the co-conspirators came in and said, no. The shading, the way we're looking at it, it's a different perspective. They're trying to fool us. It's that middle line. The middle line is the longer line. And more often than not, the subject who said it's the longer line changed to the middle line. They use that against us. Many of the things that they do, they use against us. Propaganda can be good, but it certainly can be bad. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to tell you. Fake news spreads 6 times faster than real news. That's pretty scary. They manipulate us so they get us to feel that dopamine effect. So many of us, most of us, what's dopamine? We don't even know what dopamine is. They know what it means, and they know how to give us that little addictive charge. What are some of the techniques that they use with propaganda? And again, all based on the knowledge of psychology, all based on social psychologists doing the research. Well, one of the big ones is they appeal to fear. Remember the Barry Goldwater one where they showed nuclear blast? Very, very effective in that election and campaign. They know that if we think a prominent person believes in such a thing or buys a certain product that has a halo effect for us, we want that product. Then I love this term, argumentum ad nauseum. Argumentum ad nauseum. Repeat a lie often enough and it becomes the truth. Sometimes they even direct order us and they know who will follow the direct order. Sometimes they tell you that the group that you don't like or that you disrespect or perhaps you even hate, they think this way, therefore you want to think our way because our way is not their way. Speaking in glittering generalities, vote like the common man. You know, you'll see the candidates kissing babies and doing all kinds of things. I once saw Nelson Rockefeller on a corner in New York, and a woman screamed out, I got a ticket because I came to hear you speak, and nobody had come to hear him speak. And the whole group shouted, pay it, Rocky. And of course, Rockefeller went into his pockets, had no money, so one of his assistants had to pay it. But he was the common man out with the common folk. Testimonials, slogans, slogans. I mean, I look at this one politician, I can't remember his name. Trump said that he had a chicken neck. Every time I look at him, that's all I see is his thin chicken neck. Or slow Jed, low energy Jed. It sticks. Crooked Hillary, it sticks. Slogans stick. How about lies? They lie. They lie. And as I said, people believe it. And if the lie is disproved, then people go, okay, it's a lie. But then they revert to believing the lie. Then they also have rallies. So they energize the crowd, and there's wonderful things that happen at the rally, and that translates to your doing, voting, buying, whatever it is they want from you to do. So just when you think they can't do anything more to us than read our minds, colors. They've done research on colors and what colors mean. So when you see those political ads on TV, people wear clothing that's brown or red or blue or whatever it is, just to get you to not realize, but somehow I feel comfortable when I hear from this politician. I'm just going to read you a couple of things. They know that green represents nature, fresh, loyal, blue, peaceful, purple, royal, rich, pink, soft, caring, red, hungry, romantic, but brave and bold, orange, cheerful and friendly, yellow, warmth, brown, earthy, organic stuff, black, sophisticated, powerful, mysterious, black, gray, focused, calm. Isn't it incredible? They've done all of this research in order to tell us that this is what they know we think, and we don't even know what it is. They know we think because we don't know what we think, but they do. And our prejudices are unconscious, and they go right for it. And they make us believe that anybody that agrees with us, they're intelligent. Anybody that disagrees with us, they're stupid. And they have really, really dug into this partisan divide that has captured our nation. And Russia doesn't even have to do it. It's Russian propaganda, but it's propagated by Americans who are selling a product, selling a person, whatever. Hearing something bad about somebody is worth more than hearing something good. So that's why we see these dirty campaigns with he's this, he's a thief, he's a liar, he's cheated on his wife, she cheated on her husband, she's crooked, he's not crooked, whatever. They're dirty, negative campaigns because they do more than a campaign that would tell you what a wonderful person this man or woman is, and you should vote for them because they're marvelous. Nah, better to attack the opponent. Also, we talked about conflicted people that will vote for that first person on the list. They also know that, I was reading, they know that left-leaning authoritarians don't vote. So they're not interested in going after the left-leaning authoritarians because they don't vote, but they know who does vote and they know why they do vote. And remember, first name on the ballot gets between 2 and 3% more votes simply because he or she had her first name. That's why there's rotations. Our emotions win over intellect all of the time. It used to be that we had objective news. We waited for Walter Cronkite and we believed what Walter Cronkite had to say. Now, sometimes if you experiment and you listen to CNN and you listen to Fox News, the same story with a totally different perspective and why it sells and they get the voters. There is what we are now calling political tribalism. Political tribalism. We know we belong to tribes. We know that get us to identify with a group and we are more apt to vote as that group would vote. Just trying to see if there was anything else that I just jumped out of the page at me. Just what I've said.
Terry,
Trump, yeah.
it was the questionnaires that you wanted to talk to.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank goodness for Uncle Sal. I think I might start Prevagen. Those ads are getting to me. The surveys. Do you know surveys are written on the 6th to an 8th grade level? Yeah, because that's America. That's what they think of us. They can't have us fill out any survey that is not being able to be understood by a 6th grader. They are sculptors when it comes to crafting the questions. They are sculptors when it comes to non-ambiguity. They also are interested in kind of like a social desirability element that would cause somebody not to tell the truth. They found that with Trump. There were a lot of people that voted for Trump that didn't want to tell anybody that they voted for Trump. I also think sometimes with these surveys, I've gotten calls and I've never, ever done the survey. I've always said there's somebody at home. So it's an interesting, I always wonder just how skewed that is when they poll and they call, because maybe there's a certain kind of being like myself that'll never participate in it. And the ones that do participate in it have maybe more passion. Actually, that the Dewey Truman thing, the polls got it wrong because they didn't quantify the passion in people. And I believe it was inclement weather the day of the voting, and the polls thought Dewey, even the newspaper, Dewey wins, wrong, Truman won. We have focus groups. The social psychologists said, okay, we're going to study people. We're going to study people in surveys. We're going to study people in personality questionnaires. We're going to study people in standardized even personality quizzes. But to get at the what and the why, let me get a group of people together, whether I'm looking for homogeneity in terms of the group or heterogeneity in terms of the group, but I'm going to get a focus group together and it'll be moderated by someone like me, and we'll encourage interaction and back and forth to get at the whys and how come. And that's led to a brand new field that it can be very lucrative, and that's jury consultation. They research jurors, they look into their background, the voir dire, they tell the lawyer, yes, she's acceptable, no, he's not acceptable. And again, in terms of profiling, in terms of psycho or social psychology, in terms of, what was that other term, psychographics or something like that, they know. They know people better than the people know themselves. And now I will give you back to someone who knows himself and knows other people, and maybe sometimes thinks he knows it all, if you get my drift. And that's Uncle Sal.
Thanks, Terry. Margita has her hand up. If you can hang on a minute, Margita, just got a couple of other Oh, wait a second. I hit the wrong button there. I just have a couple of videos I want to share before we go to questions. Because I want to show again the results. Let's see if this will won't. Okay, let me try it this way. Sometimes you start losing them. Okay, there we are. All right, and I'll share that. And okay.
In 1930, Germany is a liberal democracy. With elections, parliament, and the rule of law. Just 4 years later, freedom of speech is over. Most of the political opposition is in jail, and the government is in the hands of murderers.
Sounds like it's down a hallway.
This is the story of.
Okay, hang on. Let me just check this. Okay. This ought to.
Died.
Thank you, that's better.
To piece together how it happened, historians and experts have examined those 4 years, each from a different individual perspective.
You cajole, you influence, you manipulate.
They'll take us inside the minds of those that fought fascism.
They realise that these people are after your head. They want to annihilate you from existence altogether.
And the Nazis themselves.
Himmler genuinely believed that he would create a racially pure Germany, where the Aryan race would reign supreme.
The moments when history hung in the balance and the world's worst atrocities could have been prevented.
Mass murder was no problem. But it was important to be socially acceptable.
Do people care about the truth?
Okay, I just wanted to share that with you because I want to highlight that, remember, before the Nazis, Germany was a liberal democracy. And within a very short period of time, it was not. We're gonna talk about the conduit for these messages come through assorted media. We're going to talk about that next week. But now I think we'll stop for questions, comments. Lauren, I think we have Margita is ready, and we'll go from there. If everybody will, you can turn your videos back on and we'll go from here. Go ahead, Margita.
Hi, this is a question for Terry, please. I didn't quite understand why fake news have a dopamine effect, and you said something about being 6 times more effective than true, factual news. Could you explain that, please?
Well, you know, they do scans of the brain and they see what sections in the brain lights up. So that's how they can come to some of the conclusions that we say, how do they know that? Why is that so? But it's almost like, you know, what bleeds leads, and hearing something negative about somebody is worth more than praising the qualities of your candidate. gossip, uh, gossip spreads faster than the truth. So it all, it's, I guess our human psyche is developed in such a way that we are attracted to what is, inflammatory, what is negative, what is salacious, what is whatever. And certain parts of our brain light up more when we hear or we see these kinds of images. And it's, brain chemistry. That's why we know, last week we were talking about, mental illness. It's all going to be physical illness one day, because we see that the brains of schizophrenics are different from the brains of people that don't have schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're back to the human psyche and what gets our attention and what does not.
Okay, and then you said that in spite of being shown factual statements or the truth, the brain reverts back to the fake news. Is that the dopamine that has kind of or what is it?
It's just, again, human nature. It's our psyche. It's what social psychologists research about us all the time. It's kind of what cognitive behavioral therapy is based on. We have a default button, and that default button is very strong. So if we have a belief that black is white, and someone tells us and shows us convincingly that black is not white, they, through research, understand that that effect is not long-term, because you just can't tell yourself once that this is an incorrect statement. It has to be over and over and over and over again, because our default button is very strong. So unless you can get that person to change that default button, the default button remains as it is. Again, it's social psychologists, it's research. They know us better than we do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add on to it, and that is, if you consider that what we're trying to find when we do all that research is really, what are your emotions? What are the ideas in your head that trigger your emotions? So that if I have an appeal to your emotion where I teach you that black is white, and I know that I want you to understand that black is white, but if I can get into your emotion and have that be correlated with it, it's going to be very difficult for facts to get you off of your emotion. It becomes where, if I was to accept the facts, I will be rejecting my grandfather in the process. I will be rejecting all of my heritage. I will be rejecting, it's not just recognizing didactic information. It means I have to separate myself from an emotional attachment. And that's the skill that goes into that manipulation.
Emotions trump intellect all the time, all the time.
Wow.
Dave, you have a question?
Yes. The Republicans seem to have figured it out, but the Democrats seem clueless and don't know how to do a soundbite. Why can't the Democrats if they got the same research, they know the information, why can't they do better?
Well, I would just make a suggestion in looking at the what is produced as campaigns. If I look at one that is very intense on igniting emotions over things, let's say, like racial issues, I think you can see how effective that is. If, in contrast, you see people who say, I want to talk about policy issues, I want to talk about infrastructure, I want to talk about fixing roads and bridges, and I want healthcare, I want to have daycare for elderly people. Oh, do the comparison. What is appealing to logic? What is appealing to emotions? And by the way, I don't mean it as a Democrat Republican thing. If I take if I look just back in the Republican primaries in 2016, there were people who wanted us to discuss policy issues, but it was all overrun by emotional, angry, resentful issues. Nothing specific other than I'm going to build a wall. It's a great example just within, a political entity that you will have some who will understand it and exploit it, and then there will be those who won't. Yeah.
Can I say something that has nothing to do with nothing? Sal just yawned. How many of you just yawned? I'd be curious in knowing that, because believe me, this is not a test for sociopathy, but it is something that people do look at. I'll tell you how they lack empathy. And there's something that's triggered in the non-sociopath that tends to, if someone yawns, that's why yawns seem so contagious, because it makes us yawn. But the sociopath more than probably does not. And again, that's nothing about nothing, but just I throw it out there as just something interesting for us to understand that social psychologists have looked at everything, anything that could be a hint as to our personality, anything at all that can be a hint to an emotion, because emotions, as I said, trump, no pun intended, intellect.
And really, when you start talking about stuff like policy, they're not with you. They zone out very, very quickly. So it's just, when you look at the political stuff, I think it's important to do that. Yeah.
But you can't fix the bridge till you get in.
I understand, but that's, it's not, that doesn't get people's emotions going or excitement. So
another thing that they studied, get to the people immediately. Like a lot of politicians who are naive or who are don't have the money for, getting consultants that can tell them all kinds of things. It's first impressions that count. And a lot of politicians will save up the money for the onslaught at the end of the campaign, when the reality is hit them hard at the beginning, because that's first impression. Same kind of concept. And you certainly don't want to bore them. Grab.
Joy.
Okay, I understand how if you tell the big lie often enough, when you tell the truth, people just sort of ignore it. But in the case of Hitler, his big lie was the rise of the Aryan race that he depicted as blonde hair and blue eye. Yet every time they saw Hitler, they saw something different. How come even visualizing that never made a difference?
Well, keep in mind what he was doing is striking right into ideas that were existing. That is anti-Semitism, anti-Black, that those things, that those emotions that get generated are so powerful. It is far more influential than what you see with your own eyes.
So people don't believe it.
You just gotta, it is, if it's already there and the brain has exploded with all these thoughts about, what was it? Law and order. If we don't keep these people of color from coming into your neighborhood, you're going to be attacked. I mean, the story of the the black male attacking the white woman. This is, so deep, and that story's been told so many times. It is deep, and that image is there. And as soon as you say, we need law and order here in Johns Creek because we got to keep the bad people from here, that image strikes right into their head.
By the way, just the word Hitler evokes a lot of emotion in probably all of us.
Sure.
I was kind of angry with the statement Hitler was maybe not an anti-Semite. To me, Hitler was one of the biggest, most evil anti-Semites to walk the face of this earth. And so the mention of Hitler does something to me. It makes me very angry and very sad and very everything. So again, it's emotions. Get to our emotions and you get to us.
So Trump was right. Don't believe what you see, believe what I said.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't believe your lying eyes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mary.
He's really a master. He's a master at a lot of things that he does that I think it's almost intuitive, or he saw his father pull the same stuff, the slogans, the being, branding somebody in a certain way. And again, the lies, the audacity to tell the lies that he tells. And it's almost as if someone said, keep it up, keep telling that lie, because they're going to believe it. And even if someone comes on and fact checks, they'll go, oh, it's a lie, but they're going to return to the lie. So keep it up, Donald. So, I mean, he's a master at it.
I just wanted to piggyback on a comment from earlier. That comment being that propaganda is written at an 8th grade level.
Surveys are written with
surveys.
8th grade level surveys. And propaganda also is, they want to get to as many people as possible. And there's that bell-shaped curve in terms of intellect in the country. And smack dab in the middle is that person who scores 100 on the Stanford Bernays. So they want to get at a lot of people. They're not going to use words that confuse us. They're going to use words we know. They're going to be glittering generalities.
Well, medical education materials, patient education materials are also supposed to be written at an 8th grade level. So that's a pervasive level to get information to folks. So it goes both ways: propaganda, medical education, patient education, they all be the same thing. Who knows?
And you can, I'm sorry to interrupt. You can read into it as well. When it isn't written for the common man, the medical information, the common man doesn't ask questions. So you have to think to yourself, if a doctor writes this and this is what he says to me, or this is what I have to read that he's given me and I don't understand it, I have no questions to ask because I really don't understand it. Yeah. I'm sorry, were you going to say something else? Because I came in before your last word. Is that it?
I have a quick question. Endorsements used to be a really important part of political campaigning, and they've noticed in the last couple of election cycles that endorsements don't mean what they used to mean. And I'm wondering if either it's the propaganda or that there's not as much of an emotional attachment. What do you think that change is in terms of endorsements not being as important as they used to be?
Well, let me just try this one more time here. Just what I think might help answer that question if I get this. Yeah, here we go. That if you go back to 1958, surveys indicated the trust in the federal government to do what is right just about always, most of the time. So since you trusted people in government, if you were getting an endorsement from someone in government, Senator so-and-so, whatever, the president endorsed you, that sort of thing, it was beneficial. But we've had an assault on government, and we've also had a lot of changes in how we elect people and the kind of people that we elect. So that today, that what was an 80% level is now below 20%. And so those endorsements don't carry the weight that they once did. And so you really are seeing that folks are, except for some, where the, whoop, that's someone was kidnapped, so I get a message. And so what you're getting is really the respect for people in political office has diminished. Consequently, those who would give endorsements are not sought after as they were. Yeah.
So not the same propaganda issue, but because of the erosion of trust.
Because of the erosion of trust. And the fact that what we have is the political campaigns have been taken over. Even though we vote, we get to vote for people who have been pre-selected. So and we're not that enthralled with our selections often. So I hate to say give a simple answer because it's complicated. Obviously, there's a lot involved.
And celebrity endorsements. I mean, look what happens. You have a celebrity who is, put on a pedestal, and then facts come out and
right.
on.
Yeah,
so
and the rise of the influencer rather than the endorser.
Yeah,
if you will.
Big time. Do you know Facebook could really absolutely give us the next president if they went full steam ahead in what they do? The algorithms that they use are really frightening. They're frightening. And they're getting little girls wanting to be skinny and clicking on sites that are very dangerous. And Facebook will say, oh, it's the algorithm and we're going to look into it and we're going to change it. But the whole idea is that it's algorithm based.
Blame it on somebody else.
Yeah.
Hey, Penny.
Go ahead, Penny.
Just a thought about the 8th grade level reading material in contrast with our state legislature right now that's passing or probably going to pass bills limiting what can be discussed in the 8th grade, for example, in Georgia. Is there a connection, do you think? Is that a form of anti-propaganda, or how does that work with our psyches if we're not going to let children learn about truth so that when they grow up, they will not know? I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
Oh yeah, it's really frightening. It's independent from surveys being written at a 6th to an 8th grade level, because that's just the common man's ability to comprehend. Beyond that, they don't trust us. But yeah, I think that Sal and I were discussing the other day, because Sal's always thinking, he's really, I mean, I come from academia, and I can tell you that Sal is, and I mean this sincerely, is more of a scholar than just about 98% of people who claim to be scholars and who are in academia. Not only does he research to the point of just every nook and cranny of the issue, but he tries to be current. And we were talking the other day about maybe a course on racism, what's that critical theory that's going around, being woke, whatever that means. And then we said in the kitchen sink. And I think we're seeing a real philosophical shift in this country that's very frightening. They don't want kindergartners to know anything about trans people. And the reality is sitting in that kindergarten is somebody that might be trans and would save that person from years of torment if people understood it like it's a birth defect. And, but they don't even want the kids to even know that there is such a thing. It's frightening. It's censorship that we are more open to than we should be. And it's also regional. You'll find what the Southeast wants is very different from the Northeast. It's censorship, pure and simple censorship. And it scares me. And I started to watch this morning about the, the justice, the questions asked of the potential justice, and it's so partisan, it's so political. And like our Supreme Court is supposed to be apolitical, it's all just gone down a rabbit hole. And by the way, propagandists know our rabbit holes too. I was reading about that. They know where our rabbit holes are. We don't, they do. And they push us into them and bring us down. But as I said, Sal was discussing a course that would address just that question.
I look forward to it because it's really scary. Because to me, the solution is through education so that with the next generation will know better. But if we're stifling them from the beginning, I guess the next question then is, do you think there's any hope for the human race? It's very discouraging. Say something happy.
Yeah, you know what? Anne Frank, the end of her book, I mean, the end of her diary, I mean, what she endured, and yet she still had faith in human beings. So I try to have faith in the goodness of human beings. That, I see people as good, and I'm always surprised when they surprise me when they're not. But I think you've got good people, and we have to get out the vote. That's what we have to do. The vote counts.
Okay, we've gone over a little bit. Elaine, I think I picked up your question, and I'll email you the. It's a PBS production, and I'll email that to you. And so with that, Dr. Bordan, please say good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.
Okay.
And,
we will
if
see you
everyone
all.
would like to unmute themselves, and here we go, ask all to unmute, and we can all say thank you and give them
Okay,
a round of
everyone.
applause.
We'll see you next week.
So appreciate taking the time to come and spend this time with us.
No, I thank you for letting me still be part of the game.